If you want to understand how empires fall, don't look for the explosions. Don't look for the burning buildings or the marching boots. Look for the silence. Look for the moment a phone stops ringing. For the last 72 hours, the most important phone line in the world, the one connecting 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue to Langevin Block in Ottawa, has been dead. Donald Trump called them weak. He called them a national security threat. He looked at the Canadian economy and saw a vassal state, a polite neighbor that would eventually buckle under the weight of a 25% tariff. He thought he was playing a game of poker with a man holding a losing hand. But as of 6 a.m. this morning, it is clear that Donald Trump wasn't playing poker. He was playing a game from a world that no longer exists. While the White House was taking a victory lap, while the American media was obsessing over Truth Social posts, Canada was doing something unthinkable. They weren't just preparing a response. They were building a new world. Mark Carney, the man Trump dismissed as a failed globalist, just stepped onto a stage in Brussels. He wasn't alone. To his left, the leadership of the European Union. On the screens behind him, the prime ministers of Japan and South Korea. They didn't announce a protest. They didn't announce a retaliatory tariff. They announced a divorce. The secret alliance is no longer a secret. It is a documented reality. It is a structural bypass of the United States economy, and in the next 20 minutes, I am going to show you exactly how this happened, why the U.S. intelligence community missed it, and why the unbreakable American dollar is suddenly looking very, very fragile. This isn't just about trade. It's about the end of American centrality. And it's happening because Washington forgot the first rule of power: never corner someone who has more friends than you do. Let's rewind. To understand the magnitude of what just happened, you have to understand the arrogance of the last week. When Trump signed that executive order, he wasn't just imposing tariffs. He was attempting to exert total gravitational pull over the Canadian economy. The logic was simple. Canada sends 75% of its exports to the U.S. If you choke that 75%, the country collapses in weeks. They have no choice but to surrender. And for 3 days, it looked like it was working. Ottawa went dark. No angry tweets from Trudeau. No emergency sessions of Parliament, just silence. In Washington, they mistook that silence for a white flag behind the scenes. White House staffers were reportedly joking that Canada was running out of oxygen. On Wall Street, traders were betting that Carney would be on a plane to D.C. by Tuesday, begging for a carve-out. Trump even posted at midnight, "Canada is learning that being a nice neighbor doesn't pay the bills." Mark Carney is realizing his globalist degrees don't work in the real world. "They will be calling me tomorrow. I might answer." But Carney didn't call. While Trump was waiting for the phone to ring, Carney was on an encrypted line with the European Commission. He was on a secure video link with Tokyo. He was coordinating with Seoul. You see, for months, the globalists that Trump mocks have been running simulations. They knew this day was coming. They knew that the America First doctrine would eventually mean America only. They weren't folding, they were rerouting, at 4 a.m. Eastern. While Washington slept, a fleet of government jets from Ottawa landed in Brussels, not for a summit, for a signing. Let's look at the first receipt. Announcement number 1. The Canada-EU Emergency Economic Integration Pact (CEIP). This is not a trade deal. We need to stop using that word. A trade deal takes 10 years and thousands of pages of bureaucracy. This is a fast track. Integration. Carney and the EU just announced the mutual recognition of industrial standards. In plain English, it means that any Canadian product from auto parts to aerospace technology is now automatically certified for the European market. No inspections, no delays, no red tape. For decades, the US and Canada shared a seamless border. That was the machine that built the Midwest. But Trump just put a wall in the middle of that machine. Carney's response? He didn't try to climb the wall. He built a bridge to the second largest economy on Earth. Here's why this is a nightmare for American industry. If you are a manufacturer in Ontario, and you make high-end components for electric vehicles you used to sell to Michigan, now, there's a 25% tariff, you're dead in the water. But under the CEIP, you now have preferential market access to Germany, France, and Italy. The EU just waived all import duties on Canadian tech for the next 24 months. Suddenly, those Canadian factories aren't closing, they're just changing the shipping labels. The money started moving immediately, before the markets even opened in New York. The Euro-Canadian dollar pair saw a massive spike in volume. European capital is flowing into Canadian infrastructure. Why? Because the EU sees an opportunity to replace the US as Canada's primary partner. They are effectively buying a G7 economy out from under the United States. And it's not just about parts, it's about food. Canada is one of the world's largest exporters of wheat and potash. For years, the US has been a middleman for those commodities. No more, the deal includes a direct supply corridor to Europe. While American farmers and the plains are worried about retaliatory tariffs, Canadian farmers just got a guaranteed, tariff-free contract with 450 million consumers in Europe. The back door is open, and Washington doesn't have a key. If the EU deal was a slap in the face, the second announcement is a knife to the ribs. Announcement number 2. The Pacific Corridor Energy Accord. This involves Japan and South Korea. And this is where the secret alliance gets truly dangerous for the average American. For 50 years, the American energy strategy has been built on one fundamental assumption. Canadian oil and gas have nowhere else to go. Canada has the third largest oil reserves in the world, but because of geography and politics, they were landlocked. Their only major customer was the United States. This allowed U.S. refineries in the Midwest and the Gulf Coast to buy Canadian heavy crude at a massive discount, often $15 to $20 cheaper than global prices. We call this the Western Canadian Select Discount. It is a secret subsidy that keeps American gas prices lower than the rest of the world. Mark Carney just ended that subsidy. Standing with the Japanese Prime Minister via video, Carney announced that Canada is invoking emergency national security powers to bypass all environmental reviews for the expansion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline and the construction of 2 new LNG terminals on the Pacific coast. Read that again. The man who was a green finance czar just bulldozed the environmental lobby. Why? Because he knows that in a trade war, green is a luxury, survival is a priority. Japan and South Korea have just signed 20-year take-or-pay contracts for 100% of Canada's surplus energy. They are providing the capital to build the ports. In exchange, they get a stable energy source that doesn't have to travel through the Middle East or the South China Sea. Now, here's why you should be scared. If Canadian oil starts flowing west to Japan instead of south to Illinois, the American refinery system collapses. Refineries in states like Minnesota, Michigan, and Ohio are hardwired for Canadian crude. You cannot just put Saudi oil into an Ohio refinery. The chemistry is different. To retrofit those refineries would cost billions and take years. By redirecting the flow, Carney has effectively taken the American Midwest's energy grid hostage. He isn't cutting off the oil today. He's doing something much smarter. He's proving that he can cut it off. The moment that announcement hit the wires, the stock prices for Marathon Petroleum and Valero plummeted. The market realized that the infinite supply of cheap Canadian oil is gone. The US thought they were the only customer. They just found out they're the only customer Canada is willing to fire. This is the one that the media is completely ignoring. But it's the one that will define the next decade. Announcement number 3, the Aurelius Digital Alliance. Canada, the EU, the UK, Japan, and South Korea have agreed to a unified digital regulatory framework. This includes shared standards for artificial intelligence, data privacy, and most importantly, digital intellectual property. And they did something unprecedented. They specifically wrote a clause that third-party nations with aggressive trade postures are excluded from the data sharing pool. That is diplomatic speak for America is out. Since 1945, the United States has set the rules for the world. We set the rules for the internet. We set the rules for banking. We set the rules for AI. But Mark Carney just realized that if the rest of the G7 plus South Korea align their rules, and the US is the only one left out, then they are the new standard. Think about Silicon Valley. If Google or Meta want to operate in Europe, Japan, and Canada, they now have to comply with the Aurelius standards. But those standards are now being written without American input. This creates a regulatory iron curtain. American tech companies are now facing a choice: follow Washington's rules and lose access to 600 million high-value consumers, or follow the Aurelius rules and effectively betray American policy. This is how you neutralize a superpower. You don't fight their military. You make their companies choose between their flag and their profit. By noon today, the Nasdaq was down 500 points. The market isn't reacting to the tariffs anymore. It's reacting to the exclusion. For the first time in 80 years, the world is building a high-tech future where Made in America is a liability, not an asset. Silicon Valley lobbyists are currently flooding the halls of Congress. They aren't asking for tariffs, they're screaming for a ceasefire. They know that if these standards become permanent, American tech dominance ends in 18 months. And Mark Carney? He's the one holding the pen. So, how did Washington get this so wrong? It comes down to a fundamental misunderstanding of power in the 21st century. Donald Trump views the world as a series of transactions. I have more money. I have a bigger military. Therefore I win every trade. It's the art of the deal logic. It works in real estate. It works in one-on-one negotiations. But Mark Carney understands networks. In a networked world, being the biggest player doesn't matter if you are the most disruptive player. If one node in the network becomes toxic, the other nodes don't just sit there and die. They root around the toxicity. Canada is a node. The EU is a node. Japan is a node. by attacking Canada. Trump thought he was attacking a single country. He didn't realize he was triggering a network defense protocol. The rest of the world has been watching the US for years. They've seen the volatility. They've seen the pivot from Obama to Trump to Biden and back to Trump. They've realized that the United States is no longer a reliable partner. Carney's secret alliance is a physical manifestation of that realization. It's the world saying, we would rather deal with the complexity of 5 different languages and 10 different time zones than the unpredictability of one man in Washington. This is an optional America if the US is optional. Then the US dollar is optional if the US dollar is optional. Then the American debt load, the $35 trillion that keeps our economy afloat, becomes an existential threat. Who buys the debt when the secret alliance starts trading in a basket of euros and yen? This is what's happening inside the White House right now. The strategic chaos camp is realizing that they didn't just provoke a neighbor. They provoked a global realignment. They thought they were the ones holding the leash. They just found out Canada found a new pack. Now, let's talk about why you, the person watching this, should be scared. I'm not talking about macroeconomics. I'm talking about your life. If you live in Michigan, Ohio, or Indiana, your job is built on the integrated auto supply chain. For 50 years, a car part would cross the border 6 times before the car was finished. That's over if Canada integrates with the EU. Those supply chains are going to start moving east. The Rust Belt just got a fresh coat of rust. If you live in Minnesota or the Dakotas, look at your heating bill. When that Canadian oil and gas starts flowing to Japan, your local utility company is going to have to compete with Tokyo. For the same BTU, you are going to be paying global prices for energy that used to be neighborly prices. If you have a 401k or an IRA, look at the volatility index fix. The era of American exceptionalism in the stock market is being repriced for 30 years. You could just buy the S&P 500 and get rich because America was the only game in town. But what happens when the secret alliance companies start outperforming American ones? Because they have lower regulatory costs and better market access? Your retirement is caught in the crossfire of a trade war you didn't vote for. And then there's the trust factor. This is a hidden tax. When you can't trust your neighbor, everything gets more expensive. Insurance goes up. Legal costs go up. Borrowing costs go up. We are entering a high-friction world. For 80 years, we lived in a low-friction world. That was the American piece. That was the world where you could buy a product from anywhere, ship it anywhere, and pay for it with one currency. That world died this morning at 6 a.m. The secret alliance isn't just a trade pact. It's a survival pod, and the United States is the only one left on the sinking ship. So where does this end? I see the paths, and neither of them looks like the world we knew. The great de-escalation. In this scenario, the adults in the room, the CEOs of JP Morgan, Exxon, and Ford descend on the White House. They explain, in brutal detail, that the U.S. economy will seize up in 90 days if the Canadian border isn't restored. Trump, facing a collapsing stock market and a revolt from his own donors, looks for an off-ramp. He claims victory. He says the threat of the alliance made Canada give him a better deal. Carney, being a diplomat, allows Trump to save face. We go back to a new normal. But the trust is gone. The secret alliance doesn't dissolve. It just goes underground, waiting for the next crisis. The spiral. Trump hits back. He sees a secret alliance as an act of treason. He imposes secondary sanctions on the EU. He threatens to pull out of NATO. He freezes Canadian bank assets in the US. In response, Japan stops buying US treasuries. The dollar loses 10% of its value in a week. Inflation, which we thought we had beaten, roars back as import costs explode. This is the economic winter. It's a world where the West splits into 2 blocks, the America First bloc and the Global Alliance bloc. We are currently on path to every tweet, every leak from the White House, and every index card Mark Carney reads in Brussels is pushing us further down the spiral. And here's the most terrifying part: Canada has already done the math. They've decided that the spiral is better than surrender. When a country as polite, as stable, and as integrated as Canada decides to go to war with you, it's not because they hate you, it's because they've realized you are no longer a safe place to keep their future. The markets open in less than 12 hours. The traders in London and Hong Kong are already placing their bets. They are betting on Trump. They are betting on Carney. They are betting on the end of the era. We have spent 80 years assuming that the world needs America. Today, Mark Carney and his secret alliance just asked a different question. What if we don't? What happens to a superpower when it becomes a choice rather than a necessity? I want to know what you think. Is Canada's secret alliance a brilliant move of self-defense? Or is Mark Carney gambling with the stability of the entire Western world? Is Trump defending the American worker? Or is he accidentally destroying the very system that makes the American worker prosperous? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. This isn't just a debate for economists anymore. This is a debate about the world your children are going to inherit. The machine is on fire. The only question left is whether we try to put it out, or just watch it burn. Subscribe because the story is moving faster than the news cycle can keep up with. I'll be here with the next update as soon as the markets break. Don't look away. The world just changed, you need to be ready.